Hi, everyone. I'm James Garbutt.
And I'm Denny Dumas.
And this is the Garbutt Dumas Real Estate Podcast. It's Halloween, which means we've had 2 months of fall. Forget the trick-or-treating.
Honestly, it's kind of crazy.
We've had good data to predict the future. No, we're here to talk about, give you a market update, trends that we're seeing. We're in unprecedented rates that we haven't seen in the last decade. Market has shifted, and it's time for a market update. And right now, it is Halloween, October 31st, 2023. So recognize that as we're speaking, if the world gets hit by an asteroid tomorrow, this data is relevant as of October 31st.
And I think it's important to note, like, if you've been listening to our market update podcast, we like doing them every few months, and we like being really specific about product, like a specific product in a specific neighborhood. Overall, Greater Vancouver stats are interesting, but they just don't give a lot of relevance if you are an active consumer in Pitt Meadows or Coquitlam or, Burnaby. It doesn't matter. So we want to be really specific. So I think we've each picked out like a handful of different product types in different cities, and we'll share some stats about what they're doing.
I think a specific note, like sales ratio or months of inventory. The Real Estate Board provides monthly stats, and some, yes, you can easily see, okay, across the board, homes in Greater Vancouver have a sales ratio, detached homes might have a sales ratio of 15%, or call it 20% because the math is going to be easier, which if a sales ratio is 20%, it means you have 5 months of inventory. But when you're looking at the whole macro of Lower Mainland detached homes, it doesn't really tell you as good of a picture as what are homes doing in Coquitlam between 1.5 and 2 million? Or what are one-bedroom condos doing in, you name it, the Tri-Cities, New West, Burnaby, between 600,000 and 700,000. When you isolate the price points and the geography, it tells you a much better story. And I hope to think that it's a much more interesting story because for us, we sell a lot in Tri-Cities, New West, call it East Van, Burnaby, and the surrounding markets there. And we like to talk about those markets, and it doesn't make sense for us to use all macro stats that don't apply in the worlds that we work.
And for us, and hopefully for you too, they provide more insight, and it's even for us to do these every few months. There's things that surprise us that we weren't necessarily expecting to see in terms of like average price point or median price point, or average days on market in different neighborhoods. So it's actually kind of fun to do these and share these because we're really specific, and it's fun to watch like different neighborhoods doing completely different things. Real Estate Board of Greater Vancouver stats combine a one-bedroom condo in Langley with a $22 million house in Shaughnessy. And these are such different product types, and they move super differently. So I think it's fun to isolate them and see how different products are moving.
And also, like, aside from the sales rate, the sales ratio or the months of inventory, that gives you one story. If you say, there's 5 months of inventory for, call it, or let's go to Anmore, for example. There might be 12 months of inventory in Anmore. Or no, that's not a bad example for what I'm doing. Let's just go with Port Moody as a whole. Maybe there's 5 months of inventory in Port Moody. So it means that there's a lot of inventory. Like there's a lot of listings compared to the sales. But what that doesn't tell you is if you also look at the last 30 days of sales, you might see that, okay, there's a lot of inventory, but the stuff that's selling is selling quite well. On average, like the average sale price is 100% of the list price. The median days on market is like 11. So oftentimes in these markets where right now there's a market slowdown, high interest rates, months of inventory is one indicator, but looking at the last 30 days of sales tells me how the good products are going. Whereas the months of inventory, when it can go from 5 months and build up to 7 months or 8 months, that might just mean that there's a lot of $3-5 million homes in that market that are just luxury homes well overpriced for the market that are just not moving. Whereas when you look at the actual sales that are happening, it says, okay, you know what? 50% of the sale, even though the inventory is high, 50% of the sales are getting full price or above, and they're selling quick. So that tells me a different story.
In your little scenario there, you pretty accurately described Port Moody townhomes without even trying.
There we go. Well, let's go into we like to talk about what's hot, what's not, and let's just kind of be careful here. What's hot today is less hot than it was this spring and last spring, but we call it hot because just statistically, it is still a seller's market.
Yeah.
And there are a lot of products right now that remain to be seller's markets. But the overarching, if I were to have a headline for a market update, I would say the headline right now is inventory is up, supply listings is up, prices ease, and sales volume slows.
Yeah.
And that's, one unique thing is the inventory in September is higher than it was in June, is higher than it was in March. And that's not normal. Usually the inventory is highest, call it around June or July, and then September's lower. And right now, September had a highest inventory. It was the listings in Greater Vancouver, 10,082 listings in September, compared to June that had 9,990. Compared to March that had 8,617, and February had 7,868. So
compared to February, we're down 3,500. Or sorry,
no, we're
up 3,500 listings or something.
2,500 listings.
Okay.
Don't do the math there. That was not 2,500, but it's give or take, close to that. So we're up a lot of listings. So the supply of listings has increased. The sales are down. But as Denny mentioned, when we isolate the area, when we isolate the price point, it tells you a little bit of a different story.
Yeah. I think it's important to even just note that in different markets, we define a hot property type as a very different thing. Like in 2021, a hot property type was something that got 15 offers and sold 300K above asking. In 2023, a hot property type is something that sells in 2 weeks.
Well,
right?
Now in 2023, at
the end of 2023, right? Yeah. So this changes all the time. So the first thing I'll say is hot. I've got 2. Port Moody townhomes. There have, over the last month and a half, there's been 20 sales. There's currently 23 active listings. Median days on market, 7. Average price point is just less than list price. It's like 0.25% less than list price, basically selling at full list price. And if it's interesting to look at average sale prices over the last couple of years, and this is something that surprised me. If you would have just asked me to guess, I would have said Port Moody townhome, for example, would be down less than other property types, but Port Moody townhome average price point today, $996,000 for these 20 sales since September 1st. Last year, $933,000 for the same time period. 2021, September to the end of October, $939,000. So in terms of Port Moody townhomes, we're actually up.
That average sale, just so you know, a sub-$1,000,000 townhouse. The only reason it's there is the older townhomes are bringing down those price points.
Yes.
They're like a typical, call it 2005 built, let's call it a 15 to 20-year-old 3-bedroom townhome that, looks newer, isn't brand new. I have an example here, 3-bed, 3-bath, 1,386 square feet, built in 2019. That's a $1.1 million townhome.
Yeah.
And your data is Port Moody specific. Port Moody is a small community. It can be, the statistics can be insignificant if there's a small sample, but those numbers represent what's going on.
Yeah.
And I looked at townhouses in the last 30 days that have sold across Burnaby, New West, Coquitlam, Port Coquitlam, and Port Moody. And 50% of the sales for townhouses in the last 30 days sold for full price or above. The average sale price in all those markets was $1.1 million, and that $1.1 million price point in Port Moody is a 3-bedroom, 3-bath, 1,386. Well, actually, Port Moody might be a little more expensive than that.
A little more expensive. I think that exact townhome that you described is probably 125 in Port Moody.
The townhome I'm describing was actually a Coquitlam Westwood Plateau townhome.
Okay.
So it's which is probably about $100,000 less than the Port Moody equivalent.
Yeah.
But townhouses are hot. And that's because families need homes. And a lot of families can't afford a detached home. And quite frankly, if you have young kids, townhomes are loaded with young kids. So it's a nice place to live. Don't feel ashamed. You don't need that picket fence and backyard. Townhouse living is great for many. And I think, especially with young kids.
The next one, and then I'll let you share a couple hot. East Vancouver homes. So I tried to pick areas that I've sold in recently just because I have a ton of obviously knowledge from past experience in the last couple months, but Main and Fraser specifically. So these two neighborhoods, currently there are 64 listings, and in the last 2 months, there's been 27 sales. Median days on market, 12. But if you look at East Van as a whole, East Van has currently 509 active single-family listings. That's higher than probably the last couple of years. That's probably the highest we've seen in since 2019, maybe.
There might have been a surge of listings in 2021.
Definitely, yeah. So average single family price point of these 27 sales in the last 2 months in the Main and Fraser neighborhoods, 2.169. And if you go back to 2022, average price point in the same time, 1.95. 2021, 2.255. So if you look specifically Main and Fraser in these 2 months off of the 2021 pricing, we're off less than 5%.
And I'll add to that. The East Van as a whole, you're talking about Main and Fraser.
Yeah.
That represents pretty similar stats to East Van sales in the last 30 days. So I looked at the last 30 days of East Van detached sales. The average price was 2.156, and you said 2.169 in your market.
2.169.
So it's the average price, sales price in the last 30 days in East Van was 2.156. That probably gets you a 100-year-old home that has modest renos. Maybe it's a post-war 1950s bungalow box that's renovated, or a Vancouver special that's not. But 50% of the detached homes sold in the last 30 days sold for full price or above. 50%. So yes, there's a lot of inventory over maybe all-time high listing levels.
Yeah.
But that just says there's a lot of inventory that's not very good.
Yeah.
And 50% of the ones that are selling for full price or above. I thought, fun fact, I saw a nice little beautiful new home that sold in East Van. And a new house on a 33 well-designed modern home right nowadays is going for about 3.2 to 3.3. And don't get me wrong, there's prime areas close to Main Street that might command a higher price, and areas further east, call it Rupert, or just further east, that might be a little bit less, might be 2.9 or 3. But call it upper tier neighborhood, 3.2, 3.3 million for a newer home that's give or take 3,000 square feet on a 33-foot lot in a good neighborhood. And I don't think, when I look at that price, yes, that's a big price to pay. But when I look at the cost of land, the cost of building, and the process, if you're a buyer, buy existing.
Yeah.
Because you couldn't, even if that price sounds like a lot to you, if you bought a tear-down home, tore it down, built it, spent 2 years or more of your life putting that together, I think you're going to be into it for more than 3.2.
I think it's going to be close to 4. Like, I was doing this math with these clients that bought an East Van, and the lot itself is pretty much $2 million. And then what's the construction cost of a 3,000 square foot home that you're planning to live in for 25 years? Is that $400 a foot?
Yeah.
Plus a laneway, maybe? So you're probably spending 1.5, 1.6. So you're probably into it for 3.6.
Now they have, I think, step code 5, all electric, no natural gas. It might be more than 400. I mean, it's going to be more than 400 a foot for some areas. Yeah. And for some builders, you're going to have some builders that say minimum 500, minimum 550. Yeah. You're going to have some builders that might be able to do it for 350. But it's, you get what you pay for. Yeah. And East Van is loaded with half duplexes. When I look at the price, I mean, there's not a lot of new construction single family in the market, but there's more half duplexes. And when I look at the price that they're selling for, it feels like it's below replacement value. Like, it feels like, I mean, these builders are selling for a profit, and the profit's modest, in my opinion, unless they got the land for dirt cheap, which good, they got a good profit margin, but that's because they got a deal on the land and they carried it for a long time. They're selling their properties, but if they had to rebuy the land and rebuild it, I don't think it'd be an exciting margin. I mean, you really have to put, it's skinny, put it that way. And right now it's also weird because there's builders that love to build more density. That's why half duplexes have been big. If you look up East Van townhouses and you look up East Van half duplexes, there's far more half duplexes. So in other markets, townhouse is what we're talking about when we're talking about the 1,300 to 1,500 square foot family home. In East Van, it's half duplex. And now there might be 4plexes and 6plexes popping up soon. If that happens, I am very excited to see the architecture that starts coming to those streets. Totally. If you drive around Seattle, you see some pretty cool stuff. I want to see more of that in East Van. That was a tangent, Denny. Sorry.
One day.
But East Van, I'll also mention the median days on market was 12. So the stuff that is selling is performing well. What else is hot, Denny?
Should we go to not hot?
Oh yeah, let's do it not hot.
This is fun.
I feel bad for the not hot though.
Okay. There's 2. One specifically. Maple Ridge single family. Although there are a ton of listings, The sales in the last 2 months have a median days on market of 20. So that is not awful, which tells me if you're pricing correctly and you're in a good neighborhood and good street, you're going to sell, this is telling us, roughly in 3 weeks. But Maple Ridge single family, there are 447 active listings. And in the last 2 months, there's been 82 sales. October has 28 sales. 28 out of 447 listings.
Was that like a 14% sales ratio or something like that? I don't do the math.
I think that's even less.
Maybe 13, 12?
28 divided by 447, 6.2%.
Oh, I'm way off.
Yeah.
6.2% sales ratio. Wow.
For October.
That's 16 months of inventory roughly. I don't want to do math again and be wrong, but I think that's 16 months of inventory is my guess.
That's fairly accurate, yeah. The average sale price is 3.5% less than the list price. And the interesting thing for me about Maple Ridge is not that there's way more listings than sales, because that has been pretty clear in being pretty active in that market in the last few months. But the interesting thing is the average sale price and the median sale price from this time of year, so September and October, from 2023 to 2022 to 2021, hasn't adjusted as much as I would have thought. So in 2021, the average sale price in September, October in Maple Ridge was 1.36. The median was 1.26. Versus today, this year, the average sale price 1.322. So down 5%. And the median sale price 1.225, which is down again a little over 5%, 7%ish.
Maple Ridge is one of those markets that people, I mean, it was screaming on fire in 2021. Like the COVID trends were all in Maple Ridge's favor. It gained a lot of new residents. Mm-hmm. It was one of the hotter markets around. It had some of the highest price increases as a percentage in BC, Lower Mainland. And right now it's soft and it's shifted. And I guess my thought with Maple Ridge is I see it still as a phenomenal long-term market. And I see this as, yes, a short-term blip because there's not enough Maple Ridge has a lot of higher priced estates, but there's not enough people willing to move that far out in a 7% rate environment. A lot of them did the move, and a lot of the move was drawn by affordability. So maybe it's the affordable aspect that a lot of people can't do right now. But Maple Ridge is surrounded by greenery. It has incredible outdoor amenities. It has a lot of land. You get a lot of house for your dollar. And I don't see, like 10 years, 20 years from now, I see the demand for it continuing to grow. So to me, the short-term stats for Maple Ridge is telling me this is an opportunity. When construction prices are getting higher, or at least not getting lower, maybe there's a blip in the short term where they might be marginally lower for a period, but doubtful. Those structures in Maple Ridge are still big. You know, a lot of them are big homes, and those structures are going to go up in value. Like we're talking about, call it 15-year-old homes that are 3,500 square feet with a suite, or 3,600 square feet with a suite, going for around 1.5. You couldn't replace that today for that price. Mm-hmm. You're buying these homes below replacement value. And to me, Maple Ridge is a good long-term bet. I just think that in the short term, it's suffering. And I don't see that being, I could see that turning around sooner than later, but we'll see. I will say there's a lot of families out there. What I observe as a resident is a good family place. They create giant lacrosse players, so they eat well out there. They have good nutrition, and I think it's going to be. I think it's a great place to live. But I also think it's street by street and behind the times, and in some areas. So you might be riding out a bit of development if you're an early bloomer onto a new street and a new neighborhood that's getting developed for the next 10 years. Denny,
where else?
What else is you had two? That was one.
The other one, Langley Townhomes.
Langley Townhomes.
So this is not as bad as Maple Ridge single family, and more just a curiosity because a lot of this was another huge boomer and during COVID was people moving to the Fraser Valley to get a townhouse to get more space. So in the last couple months, 84 sales in Langley Townhomes, active currently 148 listings. So that's roughly 40 in October. So 40 over 148. What's that? That is like 25%. Ish.
It's like 30. It's hard to do math on the spot here. What is it? 40 over 148? Is that what you're saying?
Yeah.
At 27.
27%.
Yeah.
Median days on market, 11. Again,
that's technically a seller's market, by the way. So even though it is a colder product, I think this is more relative.
Yes.
Because I think it's technically a stronger product, but it's so much colder than it was a year ago.
Correct. Yeah. And if you look at the sale prices, again, they haven't altered as significantly as I would have guessed. So the median sale price of a Langley townhome in the last couple of months, $860. And in 2021, that was $824. In 2022, $769. So definitely saw a drop off, but it seems like this spring, there was a lot more activity. And then since the spring, we've just kind of like seen prices hold and activity go down. The really interesting thing is the number of sales in both of these two markets. So Langley townhomes in 2021, September and October, 222 sales. Langley townhomes 2023, September and October, 84 sales.
That's like 40%.
Very similar for Maple Ridge. So Maple Ridge single family in 2023, so this year, 82 sales in the last couple months. In 2021, same time period, 207 sales.
Yeah.
So sales volume down, what it was at, 60, 65%?
I think that twice as many people probably want to move as we're actually seeing.
Totally.
And to kind of paint the picture, townhomes as across the board are one of the hottest products in the Lower Mainland just because family housing.
Yeah.
We need more of it. In East Van, a lot of their density increases to get that missing middle housing. So they're trying to create more kind of fourplexes and sixplexes, townhouse style layouts. During COVID, it went absurd. I remember an example, there was a townhome in Surrey that we sold, and I remember looking at the sales history in a period, and I think it was 2021. And in August of 2020, a given townhome in that complex sold for, let's just call it an inside unit, 1,300 square feet, whatever it is, sold for $800,000. By February of 2021, in the peak of the madness, that same unit went for $1.2 million. So it went from 800 in August or July to 1.2 million nearly 6 months later. And then after that cool off period, 6 months after that, it went down to 1 million. So it went from 800 to 1.2 to 1 million. That was the roller coaster that we saw for that 12-month window for some of those products that there was a blip there where townhouses became hot and there was a migration to suburbia from urban areas. And it went so nuts that a townhouse that sold in August for 800 went for 1.2 the next February, which is madness.
Maple Ridge single family had a very similar roller coaster. It was like pre-COVID or 2020, that normal single family that was exactly what you said, let's say 3 to 10 years old, that was 3,600 square feet, was in like the 1.1 range. Mm-hmm. That went up really quickly to 1.6. Mm-hmm. And there was tons of sales around 1.6. And then as soon as rates started climbing, that went down really quickly, back down to like 1.35, 1.4. Yeah. Very similar.
I got a hot spot.
Let's hear it.
I'm going to pay some homage to New Westminster condos.
Ooh, interesting.
It's not the hottest product around, but I wanted to highlight condos in New West just because of their affordability, because of it's an urban suburb, like it's an inner city suburb, 5 SkyTrain stations, density. It's primarily a condo market. There's far more condos in New Westminster than homes and townhouses. And the condo market is performing relatively well because of the price points. I was looking at I thought I'd look at some buildings where there's more investors buying, so I looked at the Azure Plaza 88 on Carnarvon. There's 3 towers there right in front of New West SkyTrain Station. A lot of investors bought into them. And, there's an 07 unit that's about 615 to 630 square feet, depending on how the agent marketed it. Pretty common 1-bedroom plan. Nothing special, nothing fancy, but really good for rental or even first-time buyers if you want to be connected to a SkyTrain. There's one that's listed right now for $560,000. They sold earlier this year for $560,000. They sold earlier last year for $560,000. I think the one that's on for $560,000 is probably priced a little high for the market conditions today, but maybe it will go for $530,000. I don't know. I don't have the listing, but my sense is it's not far off the mark. And if you look at 530 for a rented product, it's tenanted, compared to 560 earlier this year or 560, it's, what is that? 5% off peak?
Yeah.
And that's kind of why we're seeing some investors selling off their tenanted properties, is because condos are holding their own. Another one I looked at was River Sky by Boza, because it's one of my favorite buildings. I love it. And I also see that the Pier West in downtown New West on the water is nearing completion. And I recall the $1,300 a foot price points that people paid for them. So, if someone asked me, where would you buy if you wanted to buy like, a one bedroom that you want to rent out and hold for 20 years, that was special. That was special. And to me, the answer is a view unit in River Sky. It's because it's Boza built, it's newer. You get all the benefits of being down there in the water. It has great amenities and even cold concierge. So if you had groceries dropped off, your concierge can put them in the cooler. And there was a view unit, a higher up view unit that sold for $600,000. And it is max 5% off peak pricing, but there's a similar unit didn't sell for more. So, but for $600,000, you can be 27 floors up, facing relatively unobstructed views of the river, of the water. I think the Pier West buyers that bought in the speculation might be spending $800,000 for the same unit, but they'll get a slightly newer building. But to me, the value, I see why New West condos are performing relatively well. I'm giving an example of a Boza built concrete high up view unit on the water for $600,000 for a one bedroom, compared to that same price point as a wood frame in Port Moody, a wood frame in Brentwood. Don't get me wrong, Port Moody would be probably a fun place, more enjoyable place to live right now. But once that Pier West development's done, 10 years out, that downtown core in New West, I think will be quite vibrant. So New West condos to me are performing well because their price points. And I'm just giving examples of one bedrooms because there's a lot of them. But if you look across the board, compared to other neighboring markets, it's more affordable. Denny, another hotspot I want to highlight is the Tri-Cities. And the Tri-Cities has Port Coquitlam, and Port Moody. And to me, Port Moody has drawn a lot of people in recent years because of the outdoor amenities, the waterfront. And during the COVID years, when you wanted to be outside and life was outside, they were reaping the rewards. There was a moment in time where New West and Port Moody were priced the same. And now Port Moody went up 10 to 20% above it. So, for Port Moody, people are drawn there by the beauty, by the water, by the outdoors. Coquitlam, to me, Coquitlam has all property types, so it's a big city. So the one standout thing for me is there's a lot of good home value, detached houses. In central Coquitlam, you can get a large 8,000 square foot lot with call it a 60s or 70s built home for 1.6, 1.7, which it's a better lot size than you're going to get in most New West or East Van or a lot of parts of Burnaby. But Coquitlam has a lot to offer for detached homes. It also, if you go further out to Westwood Plateau in the mountains, you got a lot of townhouses, and they're performing quite well. In the last 30 days, 30% of detached homes in Coquitlam sold for full price or above. The average sale price was 1.7, which is basically like a 3,500 square foot stucco special from the 80s on the Westwood Plateau. Or if you're going to central Coquitlam, that would be like a 60s, 2,700 square foot home on an 8,000 square foot lot. But a lot of families, a lot of amenities, close proximity to the highway, that's the draw for Coquitlam. Port Moody has the beauty, Coquitlam is sensible, and to me, Port Coquitlam is just a more sensible version of Coquitlam. Port Coquitlam is just a cheaper Coquitlam. And the draw to Port Coquitlam is the average price, the average sale in the last 30 days, the median sale in the last 30 days, which I think is more important because it reflects what's truly selling, is $1.378 million. And that's detached homes. So name a market that close to the city where you're getting, there might be parts of Surrey that are there as well, but it's one of the, if you want to be north of the Fraser River and you want to be relatively, connected to the city, Port Coquitlam has some of your best bang for the buck. And for $1.4 million, you're looking at a 2,200 square foot, 60s built home with some renos, and you're saving about $300,000 from going to central Coquitlam.
Would you say the average price point is?
For Poco, average was 1,449 over the last 30 days, but the median was 1,378.
Okay.
There was just one higher sale price.
Yeah. So that is fairly comparable to Maple Ridge single family. Maple Ridge, obviously much further east, you're getting a newer home, bigger home, But Poco, similar price points for single family, so much closer to the city. You're just getting an older, more dated home.
Correct. Yeah. Yeah. And Burke Mountain is more new construction, and Maple Ridge new construction has larger lots typically than Burke Mountain. But yeah, Burke Mountain, you get a newer home for under $2 million.
Yeah.
And that doesn't exist further west. So Tri-Cities, and with all the master plan communities coming down the pipe, like whatever they're going to do with Coquitlam Center, what they're doing with Coronation Park, huge developments. Coquitlam, the Tri-Cities as a whole, is always going to have probably some of the best options of all property types in the Lower Mainland. Denny, has anything to add? And what's hot? What's not?
I look forward to doing this in, let's say we'll do one like late January, February. Yeah. Talk about the winter. But no, it's always fun to do these because there are things that come up that I find in stats that surprise me a little bit.
I will say statistically, whether it's New West condos, East Van, kind of any property type, Tri-City, any property type, by the sales numbers, the data isn't showing downward pricing pressure. The data is showing maybe it's 5% off peak pricing, but it doesn't seem to be trending worse. Mm-hmm. And it could change. So I think we got to do this again in a few months to see if it's changed. But if we do this in January, say, we're going to be going off November and December sales, which will be dwindled. But yeah, this is... when we get out of these high rates, all these areas I think are going to be screaming like 10, 20% price gains in a year. Not year over year over year, but for a few years.